Last time, I killed all the sheep. Do I really need all of these cows? You know what? I don't need to actually make cables out of leather or anything, so I think the cows get to live today. Maybe I'll go make them a barn at some point. But not today, because this is another episode of Statech Industry, where honestly, all we do all day long is talk about technology and not killing animals, right? Last week, we finally got through titanium for modern industrialization, and we are now pretty much bottlenecked from going any further in this direction into the modern industrialization chapter, because we need stuff from the Ad Astra mod to make the next tier of stuff for modern industrialization. And is that what we're going to do today? Should we go do some rockets? Should we go see outer space? No, that is absolutely not what we're doing today, because my friend Relatable Gaming called me out on not progressing through Spectrum, where he said we can do enchantment leveling, which would have made my diamond problem completely negligible. So I went through here and basically filled out everything in this chapter to make sure there weren't any new hidden branches other than the two down here to continue into Spectrum in. And there actually were not any surprises. So to prep for getting ready for this episode, I did move out 3 of the Certus blocks to replace them with the 3 for Spectrum, and there's some bad news here. The Citron and Topaz buds do not seem to be affected by the Crystal Growth Accelerator. The Amethyst ones do. So I exposed both ends of those for these two, but they grow very, very slowly. On the flip side, it did remind me that I can enchant the Applied Energistics Annihilation planes, so I added Silk Touch to these, which is the only real way you can collect these, otherwise it breaks them instantly and gets nothing from the lower tier. So this now is collecting the top tier cluster, and I did something similar for my Certus crystals, but I gave them Fortune instead. I honestly don't remember when they added that to the Annihilation plane, but it's a pretty nice change. I also went through and made all the nano armors finally, which was pretty easy, but there's actually a pretty big conflict with these that was not immediately obvious, and it has to do with the Nightvision goggles. It turns out the nano helmet has a toggle for the Nightvision, which if you turn it off, well, it apparently breaks completely and it thinks it's on permanently now. But if this had been working properly, because it apparently, there we go, taking out the goggles, turn it off. Now we put the goggles back on, however, it starts flickering, because it keeps turning off the night vision from the goggles. You toggle the helmet back on, everything's fine. If you see that happening in your own game, that's probably the reason why, and unfortunately the keybind that's default set for it is pretty awful and does not seem to be contextually aware that it should be triggering at all. And it took me quite a while to find a button that would actually work to put it on that didn't conflict with something else that always popped up. So not the greatest design, but I at least got that part solved. Anyhow, let's collect all of these early rewards in case it helps me complete something later, and let's make a huge mess out of my inventory. Well, the only 2 interesting and newish things I've seen here is the Spectrum dust that I don't have identified yet, and this Oblivion pickaxe, which I think just destroys whatever you pick with it. Anyhow, enough stalling, let's get to the 2 new items. We've got the Quixotic powder, which looks like it's just made by macerating the Quixotic reeds, which should be simple enough, and the bottle of fading, which is a bit more complex. But the main thing we're gonna have to come up with are the fermented spider eyes, which look like they're pretty much standard. That's 1. And that's the other, which took a strangely long amount of time to craft. So that opens up 2 new wings, it looks like. And there's the Oblivion pickaxe, right on schedule. So starting with the bottle of fading, it looks like we've already completed this one somehow, which I do not feel like I've actually done here. While it claims that it wants organic material, I'm not entirely certain what that means, so let's try planting a tree near my old farm, and let's try using the bottle on it. Well, it did immediately grow into the leaves there, so hopefully this is what it needed to do. Well, I waited a little bit, and it does seem to be spreading into the other leaves, so I'm not entirely certain how this works, but now that it's reached the edge of the tree here, I'm going to take this one off. And yep, we've got the Vegetal, which did open up 2 new branches here. Glistering watermelons, which is a seed, and colored saplings, which there's 1 for each color, it looks like. And they also work similarly, so I'm going to need to get some more Vegetal before we can move on to the next step here. So while we wait on that, let's move on to these other ones real fast. So the Oblivion pickaxe, thankfully we do not need to make this, and we have one because I do not want to deal with the phantom membranes on this. So I guess let's just go pick that back up. Next, we can apparently make TNT from quixotic dust, but unstable kind of is worrying here. But it looks like it's just a standard pedestal craft here with a bunch of sand. You know what? Now is a good time to go get some more, because I don't think I've shown off this area since I redid it, just to pretty it up a little bit and make a little garden around it and a little bridge across the oil rigs. But this is where I put the reeds. Oh good, and I can't get it with the nano saber. How about just punching it? There we go. But these have to grow on top of clay. Whoops, that was one too many. Next up is cobwebs. Interesting. And looks pretty simple to make. I don't know what I would use cobwebs for, but I'm sure if they're making us do this, there's probably a reason. That one's done now also. And now onto the bottomless bundle, which looks like it's just a single slot dank. Oh, those rabbit hides might be a problem. Oh, but it looks like I have been getting some out of scrap boxes, so maybe it won't be that bad. Oh yeah, totally, I've got plenty. Alright, and with that we are now stymied until we get the plants again, it looks like, because it looks like this is the gate. So let's grab these real fast. See, absolutely nothing of value. Well, this seems to work like the silkworms from Ex Nihilo and I think a few other mods before that even, where it just consumes all of this material. I wonder if this can be bottle timed actually. Because you can't actually see if there's a spread or not. Well, that seemed to go faster. How about this one? That might have just been coincidence. Well, let's start chopping off the ones in the back that we don't need. Looks like it does not consume the logs. So maybe we can periodically replace the trees. You know what? I was using Silk Touch. I wonder if fortune matters. Nope, sure doesn't look like it. This, however, should be enough to push us through to the next stage, so let me go make 2 of the items real fast. 1 and 2, which brings us to the pigment section. So it looks like it's going to want us to make most of the trees and start smashing the leaves. I wonder if I can grow these in the greenhouse. You know what, I probably can't use the modern industrialization greenhouse, even though that provides leaves. The leaves have to be broken, so this is going to be a pain. Alright, so editor art here, I lost some footage here somehow, but let's just go through this real fast, because all I did was plant the glistering melon, which you'll be shocked to know that it makes melons. And then I planted one of the blue saplings, and all you have to do is chop down the leaves. If you can still touch it, you get the block. If you use fortune, you sometimes get these pigment vials out of it. You might have seen it drop a couple times. If you just chop the log down, you get nothing. These logs can be made into relatively pretty planks. And in trying to avoid spoilers, we're only going to show this part of the screen. But this lets you make the titration barrel, which is the next thing that I made. And this is just a bunch of the colored planks and a pigment inside the altar, which lets you make the clouded cream, the kimchi, the fresh chocolate, the suspicious brew, and the infused beverage. And the problem with these recipes is this line right here where it says it takes 1 real life hour, not in-game time, real life hour. And that's one of the lower ones. Most of the rest of these take 4 hours. And I believe most of them also require a fluid, usually water or milk. See, I knew there was a reason why I kept the cows alive. Alright, it looks like you just right-click the items in, and it kind of fills up there, and then it says something else, seal with a colored plank to start fermenting. So I think that, yep, and it tells us how long it's going to be. Wow, that's pretty awful. So I can't figure out how to make the kimchi work. It claims that it's a bunch of different vegetables in piles of 4. I've tried 3 different ones. I've tried putting the same 3 in twice. I've tried putting all 4 at once. I can't make this work. 2, 3, water. The water's already in there, I think. Plank. And it says it can't produce anything. Break it, get everything back out again. Rinse and repeat. 1, 2, 3. Water. Plank. It just feels like this recipe just does not work. Alright, I did figure it out. It was 3 different types of vegetables in stacks of 4. I thought I had tried that at one point, but it just didn't take. But I got that, I got the other 2 new ones, and then I added another one while I was at it because the recipe was open. Let's move on to the fusion shrine, which is the next step to the next tier. And it's another big, huge multi-block, but the big thing we need is one of the fusion shrines. And I think I like the look of this one more, which it's telling me I don't know how to make. Alright, so the fusion altar. Let's talk about something real fast here. If I had been capable of reading, I would have noticed this note right here that basically says you need to unlock all of them. All right, well, done and done there. That's all the ones that I can make. There's a handful like black and brown that I couldn't. I also cleaned up and added some paths here and took care of a lot of my torch spam that was on my front lawn. Not on the pyramid itself, mind you, but we'll get there. I've been finding the time to finally do some of this, at least to prettify it. But this also more or less led me directly to, well, how am I going to automate this many trees? Because this seems like a pretty awful experience to have to manually harvest them for the pigment. Well, in one bit of good news, the greenhouse can grow the trees and it can get the leaves and the saplings can be harvested manually for the pigments, so they don't actually have to be attached to the tree to generate them. That said, there are some problems with automation, so let's go through the order that I ran into it. My first thought was maybe the Annihilation plane can handle it, but it basically treats it just like it's an oak sapling for some reason. No matter how many as we kick it in here, it'll eventually give us are these saplings here. The next thing I tried was a spectrum block placer, which we just made, combined with a Kibe breaker. And this places and breaks the leaves properly as long as you have redstone signals pulsing through this, except this doesn't get you anything. It just breaks the leaves and you get nothing out of it. Instead of the Kibe breaker, I tried a create saw. That will break the leaves and get you nothing also. And finally, I tried a deployer with an axe. And well, this necessitated a spectrum timer, which is kind of annoying because it goes click, 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 combined with the block placer. But if we turn this on, this actually does work, although this requires a modern dynamics pipe because it requires the ability to ignore the tag data so that we can blacklist the axe, otherwise the axe will flow right out of here. But this does collect it. But that seemed like an annoying way to go also. And it was at about that point I started complaining to Relatable Gaming about Spectrum and how much I hated it and how much it felt like it was going to be like Thaumcraft all over again. And then he basically said, why aren't you just using a macerator? Yeah. Because for some reason, it didn't occur to me to look at the recipes for creating the pigments, which turns out you can just macerate down the leaves and the logs if you want to get them. He did say, however, that you have to lock the recipe in the macerator like that, or else it will, again, treat it like it's oak leaves and the only thing you'll get are oak saplings. So I'm honestly not going to worry about this unless I actually need large amounts of this to automate it. I'm just going to go harvest all the pigments out there and replant the trees and call it good for now. And then we can hopefully move on to the fusion altar. And now that I've got all of the pigments made that I can right now, you notice there's a handful missing: the black, brown, gray, light gray, and white. If we go back out to the Your Journey chapter in the Spectrum manual, the fusion shrine is now unlocked. And this shows the process for how to go about making it, as well as the structure, which we've already seen in the quest manual over here, which also lists everything we need. So I guess let's find out if one of my spots is big enough to hold this thing or not, huh? All right, and there we go. That was pretty easy to set up once I got the visualizer lined up with the hole in the floor, and I'm starting to think maybe I should have sunk this one deeper in the floor, but it looks like it's usable for now at least, which opens up a handful of new things. The first being the various ropes for the different branches of the Wizards mod, which I don't care about right now because their magic was pretty not great. This one talks about how to go about making brown, and this looks like a riddle of some sorts, but it mentions midnight and a new moon and bring a clock. I will sort that out in a little while. And down here is the warpstone, which lets you make waystones finally. And yet it claims we don't have the recipe yet, so that does not seem useful. Oh, you know what? We probably need to... Well, while we're waiting for the new moon, we might as well see if we can figure out how to use the fusion shrine here to make the Ice Mage's armor. Weird, they keep popping off. Well, I figured out the problem. I just am incapable of reading. It has to be outside, and thankfully it's nowhere near the new moon right now, so I have time to lay it out like right here and call it good, I think. Or maybe over there? I don't know, I've got some time to think about it. Alright, I've at least got it set up even if it's not pretty. Let's see if this actually works this time. Oh yeah, there we go. Now it's activating, of course. Oh, but I'm going to need to keep water out here apparently, and probably lava. But now we have my frost hat. Time to make the rest. Now we can at least be sure that this works, and now we just need to wait around for new moon, which is going to be a bit yet. So, pause, please. And by pause, please, I mean I'm going to enchant this so that it looks sparkly and even more blue. Still, don't think it's an upgrade over my nano armor, though. You know what? We should probably make the warp crystal as well while we're waiting, so that we can start making waystones. And there we go, that opens up the various types of waystones. which look like they're pretty simple to make other than needing the obsidian. And I'm now realizing I never set up an automated way to get obsidian yet. Although setting up another vacuum freezer doesn't sound like fun. Although there is apparently a way with Spectrum coming up. Not that we're there yet. And there it is, the new moon finally. And over here I've got everything loaded up into the Ultra. I'm hoping as soon as it ticks over to midnight this fires off, otherwise we're probably in trouble. But there's 64 of each of those. I don't know if it'll process them all. Alright, almost midnight for the clock, so let's hope that this is correct. The moon is almost directly overhead, so that seems more right than what's on the mini-map. Let's hope this kicks off here in a couple seconds. Oh, and there it goes! And a whole stack of the onyx shards, so that worked out okay. Which does open up the next area here. Oh, and more importantly, the crescent clock, which looks like it finally lets me manipulate the time. Isn't even that hard to make. But the most important part is the Spectrum Temple here, which is the next stage up of the pigment pedestal, and looks to be much, much more obnoxiously large. Alright, the first step here is to upgrade the pigment pedestal itself using one piece of onyx. Alright, and with that, we just need to upgrade this whole temple area, and it's a 13 by 13 structure, which ironically enough is exactly the size of this box right here. So I think I'm just going to lower it down into the floor this time to make it line up better. And alright, that didn't take too long to set up, although the visualizer did not like to work quite right, so I had a few issues getting this set up, but overall it was pretty simple. I think it looks decent too. That said, of course, it isn't registering that I finished this because I didn't have all of these pillars in my inventory at one time. Dang it. Fine, Mom, we'll do it your way instead of just triggering her off of the advancement that you get for touching the upgraded pigment pedestal instead. And that opened up the next step as well as a whole bunch of new stuff up here. I have no clue if any of this stuff is useful. Well, this is about the point in the episode where I realize I have been dramatically undersold on how much work it would take to progress through Spectrum to get to the point where I can actually do the enchanting or any of the other interesting things that I want to get to. So I think this is the point where we're going to call it quits and go collect our loot, yeah? And you notice that I'm not standing in front of the Tom Simple storage controller for a change. So let's go spew all of these pages of loot onto the ground. Well, it wasn't all that exciting, and what was left, I don't actually know what most of this is, because you got stuff like the 7 League boots, which maybe this makes me run and jump, but I can't seem to even equip this. The Ringling ingot for spell blades, which I guess is used for making armor, which might not be terrible, but the stats on this don't look all that amazing. The crafting accelerator, which that is useful. We need to make a bunch of these for both the fusion ultra and the pigment pedestal. A knowledge gem, which stores XP. I don't know what we would use this for though. Some pigments that I left here on accident that we don't care about. A nature staff that uses vegetal to grow sorts of plants, but again, I don't know what this is for. And the tinder pickaxe, which is like the fortune version, which just has silk touch on it. I'm sure I'll get an explanation on most of this next time I play Spectrum, but we aren't there yet. Anyhow, if you found this episode interesting and entertaining, please do me a like or subscribe if you're new. As always, I'm Ard. Thank you for watching, and I've got some torches to remove. Have a nice day.